So one more thing we're going to do with functions before we start trying to graph them and such is we're going to talk about domain. So the domain of a function, that's what numbers are you allowed to plug into that function. So the domain is the set of numbers that can be plugged in to a function. So I'm going to have a function f of x, and we want to know what numbers can we plug into this function. So the way we're going to do that is to first say there are two things you can't do in math. So two things that are not allowed. First of all, you can't divide by 0. It doesn't make any sense to divide by 0, it's undefined, so we can't divide by 0. Next thing you can't do is you can't take an even root of a negative number. What do I mean by that? You can't do something like the square root of negative 2 with a function. You can't do the fourth root of negative 8. Anytime you have an even root, so even being square, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, etc., you can't have a negative number inside the reciprocal. Not the reciprocal, the radical. So the steps for finding the domain. First step, we're going to draw a number line. Secondly, we're going to ask ourselves, do we have any denominators? If we do, then you're going to set them equal to 0 and then mark out all the bad stuff. Because remember, we can't have denominators set equal to 0, so we're going to mark out all the bad stuff. Next, you're going to say, do we have any even roots? So do we have any square roots, fourth roots, sixth roots, eighth roots, whatever? If the answer there is yes, you're going to set the inside less than 0, meaning you're going to set it negative, and then mark out the bad stuff. Next, you're going to draw the domain above your number line. And then you're going to write it out in interval form. So those are our steps for domain. So let's see. Just kind of mark this out here. Let's look at the function f of x equals 1 over x plus 2 minus the square root of x minus 3. I want to know what's the domain of this function. So my first step is I'm going to draw a number line. So here's my number line, my real number line. Do I have any denominators in this problem? I do. My denominator is x plus 2. So I'm going to set that equal to 0 and solve for x. Then I'm going to come up here to my number line. Here's minus 2. I'm going to mark it out. Next, I'm going to look at, do I have any even roots? And I do have even roots. So I'm going to take everything that's inside the radical and set it less than 0. And then solve for x. Come up here. This says mark out everything less than 3. So I'm not going to mark out 3. I'm going to mark out everything less than 3. So we set the denominator equal to 0. We set everything inside the even root less than 0, marked it all out. Now I'm going to get a different color here. I'm going to go to blue. What did I not mark out? So look at my number line. What did I not mark out? Well, I didn't mark out 3. And I also didn't mark out anything larger than 3. That blue line that we just drew, that's my domain. So my domain, 3 to infinity. Now why is it a parentheses there? Because this was a closed dot. The blue line is my domain. So let's try another one here. Let's do 3 over x squared minus 9 plus the square root of 2x minus 1. And I want to know, what is my domain? So remember, step 1, draw my number line. Next, do I have any denominators? And I do. I have 1. So we're going to set it equal to 0 and solve for x. So I get x squared is 9, so x is plus or minus 3. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to mark out minus 3, and I'm also going to mark out 3. Next question, do I have any even roots? I do, so I'm going to take everything that's in that radical and set it less than 0, and then solve for x. So I get 2x is less than 1, x is less than 1/2. So I'm going to come up here, 1/2 is here. I don't want to mark out 1/2, it says not equal to 1/2, so I'm going to mark out everything less than 1/2. Okay, so that's all the bad stuff. Everything that we marked out is bad, so right above it, I'm going to say, what did I not mark out? So 1/2 to 3, and then everything larger than 3. So what's my domain? It's going to be 1/2 to 3, not including 3, remember, because we put it up, the blue line is what we're representing right now, and then also 3 to infinity. Let's do one more example here. Let's let f of x be 2 over the square root of x plus 1. I'll change that to be a minus 1. You'll see why when we do this. So the square root of x minus 1 plus 1 over x plus 3. I want to know what's the domain of this function. So what am I allowed to plug in? So here's my number line. Ask yourself, do I have any denominators? Well, I actually have 2. I have 2 denominators. So I have that one, but then I also have that one. If you solve each one of them, I get x is equal to -3 for the first one, so I'm going to come up here, mark out -3. For this one, square both sides, so I get 0 and x is equal to 1. So I'll come up here to 1 and mark that out. So I had 2 denominators, set both of them equal to 0, and mark out the bad stuff. Next, ask yourself, do I have any even roots? And I do. So take what's inside the radical and set it less than 0. So x is less than 1. So let's see, here's 1, mark out everything less than 1. Okay, now that we've marked out all the bad stuff, right above it, what did I not mark out? That blue line is my domain. So my domain, 0 to infinity.